WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Banjul, 7 p.m. in Niamey. Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM worldwide at wadr.org and on YouTube and Facebook at WADR English. Here are the top stories. The AES Confederation Parliament begins its inaugural session with a 45-member structure. FLA movement in northern Mali again frees 20 soldiers after years in captivity. Authorities in Ghana remove more than nearly 3,000 migrant beggars and illegal migrants from the country.
Our objective is to reduce irregular migration and unlawful activities associated with it to the barest minimum.
And Nigerian social rights group SERAB urges Electoral Commission to publish political donation limits ahead of the 2027 general elections.
Our call is predicated against the background of the experience of Nigerians in previous election cycles, 2023, 2019, up till 1999.
Details of these stories and more coming up on this edition of Newslink.
On the news, this is Abdullahi Hassan.
Glad to have you join us. We begin in Niger, where the inaugural session of the Parliament of the Confederation of Sahel State AES opened today, Monday. Members of the Confederal Parliament were officially installed and are expected to work on the socio-economic development of the bloc, as well as efforts to combat insecurity. The Parliament, representing Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, is the latest institution created by the AES bloc since January 2025. Here's a report by WADR's Yakuba Bibulai in Niamey, presented by Augustine Koli.
The inaugural session of the Parliament of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, opened in Niamey on Monday. Nigerian Prime Minister Mahamat Lamine presided over the session, with senior officials from the three AES member states present. Under the working structure, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger each have 15 MPs, resulting to a 45-member confederal parliament. Burkina Faso's transitional parliament speaker has been chosen to lead the AES parliament, while representatives from Mali and Niger will serve as vice presidents. The 45 members will hold the status of confederal lawmakers, despite not being elected through direct popular vote. Speakers of Parliament of Togo and Chad were also seen at the inaugural section of the AES Parliament in Niamey. The new confederal lawmakers are expected to begin their official work on August 29, focusing on the socio-economic development of the AES and efforts to address insecurity in the region. The Parliament is one of many institutional frameworks, such as the Joint Task Force, the Confederation Media, and the College of Heads of State that have been operationalized. The Confederation Development Bank and Airline Company are still under consideration.
Augustine Kole with that report filed in by WADR's Niamey correspondent Yakuba Habibulai. Still in the Sahel, but this time in Mali, 22 Malian soldiers held by the Azawad Liberation Front FLA have been released in the northern region in a prisoner exchange. The soldiers were freed on Sunday in the Anafis area, bringing to 110 the number of Malian troops released by the group since August 13. Recall that 82 soldiers were released earlier this month, followed days later by 6 wounded troops. Christopher Tichu completes the story.
Security and local sources say some of the soldiers had been in captivity for more than 3 years, while others were captured in clashes in recent months. The identity of those released by Bamako remains unclear. The FLA described most of them as civilians who had been detained for years. However, the Malian government has not publicly commented on their identity. The latest exchange follows 2 earlier operations. On August 13, 82 soldiers were released. 3 days later, 6 wounded troops were transferred from Kidal to Gao with the help of the International Committee of the Red Cross. In return, at least 8 people detained by Malian authorities and linked to Azawad Liberation Front were reportedly released. Some reports put the number at 9. For now, the exchanges do not amount to political agreement between Bamako and the FLA, but they suggest that channels of communication remain open to negotiate the release of detainees. The releases come as fighting between Malian forces and armed groups continue in northern Mali. It remains unclear whether Algeria and other mediators play a role in the exchanges. The development comes as Prime Minister Abdoulaye Maïga visits Algiers, seeking to revive ties between Mali and Algeria after months of diplomatic tensions.
Christopher Teacher reporting there. Crossing to Ghana, authorities have removed more than 2,200 migrant beggars and 774 other illegal immigrants linked to transnational organized crime in the country. The figure covers operations carried out last year as the government intensifies efforts to tackle irregular migration and protect public order. The Interior Minister says the crackdown is continuing this year with more than 1,100 additional foreign nationals already removed by the end of July. From Accra, Eliklim Auku reports.
Ghana has stepped up its crackdown on irregular migration, with Interior Minister Mohamed Muntaka Mubarak saying hundreds of foreign nationals have been removed from the country this year. Speaking at the Government Accountability Series, Muntaka said 960 migrant beggars have been removed from the streets of Accra and Kumasi, while another 186 illegal immigrants were deported by July.
We are pursuing this removal fully conscious of Ghana's obligation under the ECOWAS Protocol on free movement of persons, as well as the diplomatic relations and long-standing ties we and other countries have. Our objective is to reduce irregular migration and unlawful activities associated with it to the barest minimum, while ensuring that enforcement actions are lawful, undertaken by the appropriate authorities and carried out in a manner that is respectful of human dignity.
The minister says Ghana remains committed to strong diplomatic relations with other countries, but will not compromise national security or public order.
We are pursuing this removal fully conscious of Ghana's obligation under the ECOWAS Protocol on free movement of persons, as well as the diplomatic relations and long-standing ties we and other countries have. Our objective is to reduce irregular migration and unlawful activities associated with it to the barest minimum, while ensuring that enforcement actions are lawful, undertaken by the appropriate authorities and carried out in a manner that is respectful of human dignity.
He says the government has agreed to provide security agencies with the logistical support needed to expand the exercise and strengthen enforcement. Muntaka says Ghana will maintain its tradition of hospitality while ensuring that national security, public order, and the rule of law are upheld. For WADR, Eliklim Auku, Accra.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
This is Newslink. Remember, we stream live at wadr.org and on YouTube and Facebook at WADR English. Let's now take you to Guinea, where the government says the death toll from a landslide at the Dar es Salaam landfill in Conakry has risen to at least 30 people, with 22 injured. The disaster occurred around 2 a.m. on Sunday morning in the Besia commune, following heavy rains that caused several homes to collapse. For more on this, let's join Deborah Amour.
The Dar es Salaam landfill incident is a repeat of a similar situation which took place in 2017 when a mountain of garbage collapsed onto nearby homes. In the current incident, however, the death toll is high, with around 30 dead and several injured. Victims and survivors shared their stories.
The number is enormous. Precisely in the family, we have 4 to 5 people, and until now, people are in the rubble. We are just extracting people.
The consequences were harmful for our discharge. We cried out so that they could relocate this landfill here. Here are the consequences.
Following the previous tragedy, several awareness sessions were organized by the Ministry of Sanitation and the Military Engineering Corps to encourage the landfill's occupants to leave. However, despite these efforts, many families remained. Colonel Usman Bari and Jenabu Kamara are respectively the coordinator of the eviction operation around the landfill and the Minister of Territorial Administration.
It's regrettable. It's Guineans who died. We didn't want it. We did the best we could. The Military Hygiene Battalion and the Ministry of Sanitation, we fought all these months to be able to raise awareness with the neighborhood chief.
We have been trying for years to get people to leave this place because you yourself have seen the health risks that the area presents for the population. But unfortunately, it is not easy because each time we tend to say that it is God's will, but there is our own human will as well.
On Sunday evening, several buses were mobilized to evacuate survivors and other residents of the landfill. The government intends to permanently close the site in the coming days. The search for victims continued on Sunday evening.
A report by WADR's channel Alpha Ibrahima Balde in Conakry, voiced by Deborah Amour. In neighboring Liberia, thousands of people remain behind bars for a prolonged period without being convicted of a crime. The Independent National Commission on Human Rights says more than 3,970 people were in prolonged pretrial detention across the country's 16 prison facilities in 2025. The Commission maintains that some detainees had spent between 2 and 6 years awaiting trial. The figures are contained in the Commission's 2025 Human Rights Report, which assesses the country's human rights situation during the year. From Monrovia, Abraham Parker reports.
The report is titled, "For Monitoring to Meaningful Mitigation, Strengthening Human Rights Protection in Liberia." It also raises concerns over violence against women and children, domestic violence, sexual and gender-based violence, and mob violence. NCHR Commissioner for Planning and Monitoring, Attorney Pamela Doe-Pravi says, pre-trial detention remains one of Liberia's most pressing human rights concerns.
980 persons in pre-trial detention at Monrovia Central Prison alone, and some of them are up to 5 years. This is pre-trial detainees we are talking about, and the 6.7 altogether pre-trial detention, bringing us back to the number of over 2,000 prisons.
For civil society, the Human Rights Report presents a continuing challenge to Liberia's justice and governance systems. Sinta Executive Director Anna Simiami welcomes calls for increased support to the Human Rights Commission.
But this is not a reflection of the human rights situation out there in terms of pre-trial detainees, for example, in terms of the rights of women, girls, and other persons that have been abused, all the different things we're seeing in terms of the level of corruption and how it impacts on society, in terms of what we're seeing currently regarding the decay in the security sector, in terms of major actors colluding with drug actors to perpetrate corruption and other offenses against the state.
The government acknowledged that it has not achieved perfection in protecting human rights, but remains committed to improving its human rights record. The Independent National Commission on Human Rights says its latest report seeks not only to document violations, but to strengthen efforts toward meaningful mitigation and accountability. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Now turning to politics, Nigeria's Socio-Economic Right and Accountability Project, otherwise known as SERAP, is asking the country's Electoral Commission, INEC, to publish political contribution limits and financial records of political parties ahead of the 2027 general elections. The organization is also demanding details of how the Independent National Electoral Commission plans to monitor and enforce compliance with political financing rules. Kolawole Oluwadare is a deputy director at SERAP.
Our call is predicated against the background of the experience of Nigerians in previous election cycles, 2023, 2019, up until 1999. That specifically the role that money plays in our campaign and electioneering and even in the politics in Nigeria. And given the provisions of the Electoral Act, which I also believe foresees these kind of things, which has given INEC, that is the electoral umpire, the ability to determine the threshold in terms of political contributions by individuals or corporate bodies to political parties and candidates is why we've taken that step, so that INEC can do that, and not only do it, but be seen to have do that by the electorate, so that it increases confidence in INEC as an institution, and even in the process leading up to the elections early next year.
Kolawole Oluwadare joins us later in the news for more analysis. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. We also stream live at WADR.org and live on YouTube and Facebook at WADR English. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The AES Confederal Parliament begins its inaugural session with a 45-member structure. FLA movement in northern Mali again frees 22 soldiers after years in captivity. Authorities in Ghana remove more than nearly 3,000 migrants, beggars, and illegal migrants from the country. And Nigeria's social rights group set up urges Electoral Commission to publish political donation limits ahead of the 2027 general elections. Still ahead in the news, we have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Connecting Ghana to West Africa. This is Nadidi Tete in Accra, and you're listening to WADR 94.9 FM, Dakar.
Many thanks for staying with us. Now, several policy makers and diplomats, including civil society leaders, researchers, and members of the African diaspora, will meet in Addis Ababa to discuss the future of U.S.-Africa relations. This gathering marks the fourth U.S.-Africa Futures Summit, scheduled for Tuesday, August 25, 2026. Organizers include the Open Society Foundations, OSF, Humanity United, Global Futures Collaborative, and the Institute for Security Studies in Africa. This year's meeting marks the first time the summit is being held on the African continent after previous editions in Washington. Emoradet has more.
The summit comes at a time of major geopolitical changes, including growing competition over Africa's critical minerals, changing development partnerships, migration pressures, and concerns over the future of the international rules-based system. 5 key areas will dominate discussions. The first is Africa's role in an increasingly multipolar world. During this session, participants are expected to examine how African countries can turn their growing diplomatic influence into greater bargaining power and ensure the continent is not simply a battleground for competition among global powers. The second focus is development cooperation. Discussions will look at the changing nature of international aid, the need for greater domestic resource mobilization, and ways to build partnerships that support African priorities while reducing dependency. Critical minerals will form another major theme of the event. With global demand for minerals linked to the energy transition increasing, participants are expected to deliberate how African countries can move beyond exporting raw materials and develop local processing, manufacturing, skills, and technology. Migration, mobility, and the role of the African diaspora will also be examined. Organizers say the broader goal of the summit is to develop practical recommendations for a stronger U.S.-Africa partnership, while giving African countries a greater voice in shaping their place in a changing global order.
Emoradet with that report. Meanwhile, we'll bring you details as the summit kicks off in Addis Ababa with voices of actors on the ground. Now, just before the guest interview segment, let's take you to the Gambia, where the central bank has maintained its benchmark policy rate at 14%, despite continued inflationary pressures and uncertainty in the global economy. Authorities say the country's economy continues to show resilience with growth in key sectors, including tourism, construction, trade, and financial services. Central Bank Governor Bouazizi announced the figure after a 2-day meeting organized by the Monetary Policy Committee. From Banjul, Rosamara Cates reports.
The central bank says it is maintaining a cautious monetary policy stance with a focus on supporting economic activities while ensuring inflation does not undermine the gains being recorded in the economy. Bank Governor Seydi says the Gambia's economy has remained resilient despite challenging global conditions, with provisional figures showing 5.7% growth in 2025. He also speaks on the decision to maintain the policy rate at 14%.
The geopolitical tensions From COVID, we came to Russia-Ukraine war. Those are major geopolitical shocks or external shocks to our economy. Then we came to this most recent Middle East crisis. All those have implications for the domestic economy and our focus. Anytime we give projections for expectations of inflation reaching our medium-term target of 5%, we indicate that these are contingent on this upside risk not materializing.
According to the central bank, the growth in 2025 was supported by strong activities in tourism, construction, trade and financial services alongside private investments and remittance inflows. The bank has now risen its 2026 growth forecast to 5.8%, up slightly from the previous projection. But despite the positive growth outlook, inflation remains a major challenge. In this context, Governor Saidi says the central bank will continue to monitor inflation and remains prepared to adjust monetary policies if necessary.
The central bank continues to maintain adequate international reserves, providing an important buffer against external shocks and exchange rate pressures.
For now, the 14% policy rate therefore remains in place as policymakers continue to assess both domestic development and risk from the global economy. For WADR, Rose Samara Cates, Banjul.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
Our guest this evening is Kolawole Oluwadare, Deputy Director at Nigeria's Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. As we told you earlier in the news, the organization is calling on the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to publish the threshold for financial contributions to political parties ahead of the 2027 general elections. SERAP says greater transparency on political financing is crucial to preventing undue influence and strengthening Nigeria's electoral process. Well, let's hear from Kolawole Oluwadare.
There are provisions in the Electoral Act that gives INEC the power to determine that threshold, not only to determine it, but to also publish it to Nigerians. It's in the Electoral Act 2026. It's also in the previous Electoral Act, the Electoral Act 2022, so it's not a new provision. INEC has those powers to regulate political parties generally in the Constitution.
Well, in your opinion, why is it that INEC has not published the cap or threshold for contributions to political parties in recent times? Or is it possible that it has, but it was never really made public?
I do not know why INEC hasn't done this in the past. I would want to actually believe that INEC has done so. Perhaps it wasn't made public, which is why our request is also asking INEC if that has been done and if the answer is in the negative, for INEC to do so promptly. Because I see no reason why INEC would not do this very significant part of his duties in leading up to the elections. And I think this is a call that should be echoed by all other organizations, but also by the electorates who I'm sure wants to see INEC succeed in its job up to credible elections that would ultimately the various government offices come next year.
There are countries out there that are also approaching elections, and this same call is being made. Now, to what extent would SERAP say that money politics or the influence of money on politics really erodes confidence in the entire democratic system or governance?
It's bad, and poverty makes it worse. And that is why our advocacy is backed by not only the law, the Constitution, and the Electoral Act in Nigeria, but by the experiences we've seen over time, particularly in Africa, where the poverty level is high and unemployment is at an all-time low. And we've seen that over the years, particularly in Nigeria since 1999, how those who have access to wealth, whether it's illicit or even legitimate, can use it to sway the opinion of the people, or sometimes even subvert the process to get away with anti-electoral offenses. And that is why we must, at this time, with the rise of anti-democratic governments in Africa, ensure that we protect democracy, not only as a system of governance, but also all the processes and institutions that lead up to democracy, and confers it with legitimacy as against military rule.
And so finally, clearly your message, Kolawole, is that African politics should be guided by policy politics and not money politics.
Of course, money politics will not make democracy function as it is. And I'm talking of the election itself and governance that would follow after the elections. Democracy should be governed by ideas and policies. What does the government or the candidate or the political party stand for? When that is influenced by money, money is not a policy. The money is not an ideology. Money, particularly from those who are obtained from illicit funds, can only get the wrong people into office. And that is why money, as much as possible, which also features in a lot of laws in all over the world in the electoral laws, should be the list of what becomes the tool that determines what the people vote for, how they vote, or who eventually they vote for.
The voice of Kolawole Oluwadare, Deputy Director, Nigeria's Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. In the sporting world, we begin with athletics. Ethiopian distance runner Yomif Kelecha has set a new men's half marathon world record in Buenos. The 29-year-old clocked 56 minutes, 51 seconds, cutting 29 seconds off Jacob Kipilomo's previous record of 57 minutes, 20 seconds. The record is subject to official ratification. Still with athletics, Moroccan Olympic champion Soufiane El Bakali suffered his first defeat of the 2026 Diamond League season, finishing second in the 3,000-meter street place chase in short of Poland. Ethiopian Godana Shimeju won in 8 hours, 2 minutes and 74 seconds ahead of El Bakali. Morocco's Salah Eddin Benyazide completed the podium in 8 hours, 5 minutes and 8 seconds. And turning to football, African players made their mark across European League over the weekend, with several finding the net. In England, Senegalese defender Nobel Mendy scored on his debut for Hill City in their 2-0 win over Manchester United. In France, Senegal's Jami Gueye scored in Le Mans' 2-2 draw with Brest, while in Turkey, Egyptian star Mohamed Salah netted twice for Trabzonspor in a 2-1 victory over Besiktas. Meanwhile, Ivorian youngster Yon Jomande helped Real Madrid secure a late 2-1 win over Espanyol in Spain. And that's it for sports. With that, you've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to Mustafa Sek and Sheikh Njai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at WADR English, and stream live at wadr.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a repeat broadcast of WADR's Opinion Poll Series, It's You Speaking. I'm Abdullah Hassan. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.